Sarah is the Assistant Director of International Charters at Advance HE in the UK. Advance HE is a merger of 3 different smaller higher education nonprofits in the UK, one of which was the Equality Challenge Unit. They are the ones that ran the Athena Swan Gender Equity Charter and the Race Equality Charter. And their process is what we have been working with in the United States. It's spread to Australia, Ireland, Scotland, now going into Canada. So it's spreading, but hopefully like a positive virus throughout the world so that we can make things more equitable. And on that note, here's Sarah.
Thanks, Beth. Yeah, I can't even begin to try and follow Shirley, so I'm just gonna be me and do my presentation. And yeah, thanks again, Beth, for putting me on straight after Shirley. You also, you didn't actually show me how this works. Hang on. Yay! Okay, yeah, so as Beth said, my name is Sarah, and I work for Advance HE, and Advance HE owns the Athena Swan Charter. So I ran the Athena Swan Charter from 2012 to 2019. And then I moved into the sort of international area, so now my job is still around Athena Swan, but supporting the international partners to implement it in their different countries. Before that, I was at the University of Cambridge, managing their Women in Science initiative, so I had the pleasure of actually putting these applications together and supporting the institution and the departments to improve their structures, systems, and cultures. So the Athena Swan Charter is one of the flagship programs of Advance HE, and it was founded in 2005, and there were originally 10 founder members. We now have 164 members, which is pretty much all the institutions in the UK and Ireland. The ones that aren't involved are the very small specialist arts colleges. And it was originally a recognition scheme of excellence in women's employment in STEM, but in 2015, with some feedback from the sector, we expanded, and we now recognise commitment to gender equality across all disciplines. So the arts, humanities, social science, business and law areas as well. And also we look at the underrepresentation of men at undergraduate level. We also expanded to cover students as well as academic staff and professional and support staff, because just focusing on academic staff meant that we weren't fully addressing the culture of the institution or the department. You can't just focus on one area if you're trying to change and amend a culture. We also expanded to get institutions to consider the intersection of gender and race within their data as well. And also ask them about the experience of trans staff and students. We don't ask about the data of trans staff and students, just the policies and practices that are in place to support them. And so this is the Sea Changes using this framework and this process for its awards and its recognition. So what is the process itself? So we have 10 principles in Athena Swan, and I'm not going to sort of show them because we've got a limited amount of time. But what happens is the Vice-Chancellor or the Director of the institution signs up to these 10 principles, and then after that the institution can apply for a bronze award. And the awards recognise progress towards gender equality, and they require the institutions and departments to conduct a robust self-assessment. And so we ask you to collect qualitative and quantitative data, and then use that to identify the good, the bad, and in some cases the ugly, and put smart actions in place to continue the good and address the bad and the ugly. That will get you the bronze award. If you're looking to move up to silver or gold, you then have to show positive impact of the actions that you've already put in place. And for gold, you need to be beacons of gender equality and out really sort of championing gender equality and championing the work that you do. So once an institution gets their awards, then the departments can start applying for awards. And the reason we do that in the UK, and actually it's Ireland and Australia as well, is the idea that it would be very difficult for a department to start building on an institution's policies and practices if they aren't all sort of there and people don't know about them and they haven't gone through some kind of assessment themselves. So for us, it was important that the institution sort its centre out first, and then departments can start building on that. So for us, it's us trying to sort of combine a top-down and bottom-up approach for the institutions. So what is it all about? It's about commitment to removing barriers that contribute to underrepresentation. It's not about hiring or promoting people because they are underrepresented. It's not planning to suggest to do things or operating, as we would call, a deficit model, which is what Shirley said, the fix the underrepresented groups model. It's about taking a targeted approach to issues that may be of internal or external origin, and it's about good practice and honesty. And it's not about the report or the application itself or getting awards. So it's an individualized approach, and it's not a box-ticking exercise. And I get asked all the time, okay, so what do I have to do to get the award? Do I have to put some mentoring in place, unconscious bias training? And I'm like, I don't know. What's going on in your institution? What are your issues? There's no silver bullet that's going to fix it. It depends on your institution, your location, your subject type, all of those things. So it's where the sort of critical analysis and robust self-assessment comes in, so that you have to identify the reasons for exclusion and underrepresentation in your institution or your department. You have to develop a 4-year SMART action plan, so specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, and you have to be able to show progress over time. Also, the awards are only valid for 4 years, so you don't get the award and then sort of sit on it and that's it forever. You have to apply, reapply again, renew again after 4 years. So it's an additive process, and so the bronze is, as I've said before, the thorough self-assessment, identifying the issues and putting actions in place. So you don't have to be perfect, you don't have to be able to show impact already. You'll get an award for knowing what your challenges are and taking strong proactive actions to address them. At silver level, that's where we want to see impact of actions that have previously been put in place. And then the gold is about sustained impact and being a beacon. So the applications themselves ask for data and evidence around 4 key areas. And these are the 4 key areas we believe are barriers to everyone's career progression. So the key career transition points, so recruitment, induction, promotion processes. Are they fair? Are they transparent? What sort of training is in place for people who are sitting on those panels? Career development. What career development is in place to support particularly early career researchers? How is the institution and department managing flexibility and supporting those before, during, and after a career break? And what's the organisation and culture of the institution and department like? Who's making the decisions? How do you celebrate success? How do people feel about working in that institution or department? So on quickly to benefits and impact. So the reason why I think the process works is that it was set up by the research and academic community for the research and academic community. It wasn't set up by Advanced HE or ECU as we used to be. It was a group of women at the time in 2004 who had seen lots of pockets of good practice going on nationally, but nothing that was going to affect any change nationally. So different institutions were running things, and they might have a small impact within that institution, but there was nothing working nationally. And so there was a meeting at the Royal Society, and lots of women from the sector came to talk about this. And by the end of the first day of the conference, they had agreed that some kind of national award scheme and charter would be the best way to make this work. We insist that the work is led and championed by senior academics, so it has to be, the principles have to be signed up to by the Vice-Chancellor, but then the applications, the work, the action plans themselves have to be endorsed by the Vice-Chancellor, heads of schools, or deans of faculty. As I've said many a time, it requires a thorough self-assessment and reflection. So it's not just a data dump. The panels are looking for the institutions and departments to really understand and unpick what the data is saying. You have to carry out staff consultation and engagement, and so we're looking for survey data or focus group data to inform the applications, analysis and action. And it's a peer review process, so we don't make the decisions, it's the peers in the sector. So we have panelists who are academics, people working in EDI in higher education, subject specialists, and they all sit around and they are trained and they assess the applications to see if you've done what's required. So looking at the benefits of engaging in this process, it really does help highlight areas to make positive change. It should be seen as a positive, not just, oh no, we've got all these issues. It's like, oh, we've got some challenges, but we can do this to address them. It also actually provides a focal point for existing informal good practice. And I found this at Cambridge. There were lots of good things that were going on, but they weren't anywhere. A lot of people didn't know what was going on. There were just these sort of pockets within different bits of the institution, and it helps bring it all together and get your staff involved and get them knowing about what the policies and practices are. It helps institutions and departments increase their awareness of career progression issues within their institution, and so it can help you retain the talent that's there. It can demonstrate a good working environment to job applicants. So the Athena Swan logos are used very much in the UK and Ireland on job applications, so that people know that you're working towards a better working environment. And it's flexible to context, subject, country, size, and type of university. And we've seen that in the way that it has worked in the UK, but also Ireland, research institutes as well, Australia, now a flexible and adapted version for the US as well. So there's been a few evaluations of Athena Swan carried out over the years. There was one in 2011, but we actually carried that out ourselves. So in 2014, we thought we'd carry out something a little bit more independent. And so we got the University of Loughborough to conduct an evaluation. And they interviewed those who were in institutions with awards versus those that were in institutions without, and departments with and departments without. And what they found was that there was evidence of sustainable change and positive difference in departments with awards. But also the institutions were applying because it was the right thing to do. And this was at a time where there were, there still are, funding links to having these awards. But even though there were reasons that you might apply for funding, institutions were still saying that they were doing it because it was the right thing to do, not because of the link to funding. And so there was evidence of sustainable change within departments that held awards. Women in particular reported improved visibility, increased self-confidence, and enhanced leadership skills. And all staff, so men and women, professional and support staff, reported positive differences in career satisfaction and development opportunities within silver holding departments. And also administrative and technical staff reported a greater sense of belonging. So it had been a while since we'd done an evaluation, so we've just carried out another one in 2019. And so this evaluation came out literally last week, and I think Beth is going to send a link to it. Yes, you are now. I sent her like the preview, and I was like, this is confidential, don't share it yet. You can share it now. So the 2019 evaluation combined qualitative and quantitative analysis. There was a survey sent out to around 2,500 academics and researchers. The researchers looked at the applications themselves, as well as HESA data, which is our UK Higher Education Statistics Agency, which collects data on all protected characteristics in UK higher education. And so the evaluation found that the Charter is perceived as a key tool to help in the process of delivering real behavioural and cultural change. Each institution has a champion of Athena-Swan, or an EDI champion, and it found that 93% of champions believe that the Charter has had a positive impact on gender issues in their institution, department, or research institute. 78% of those surveyed believe the Charter had a positive impact on EDI generally, and 78% believe the Charter had had a positive impact on the career progression of women. So looking at women in gold departments, so we do only have 14 gold departments in the UK, but the evaluators wanted to look specifically at what the difference was between women in those departments. And so women in gold departments compared to bronze and silver reported that they were more satisfied with their professional development review or appraisal, that they were more optimistic about career prospects, and also more likely to have a mentor. Women in gold departments were also more familiar with promotion criteria and processes, and more likely to have been encouraged for promotion. In addition, departments that held awards, so bronze, silver, or gold, had 7% more female staff compared to those that didn't have an award. They also had more gender-balanced senior level promotions, and more women on job shortlists, and made more appointments to women. So overall, the evaluation found that the Charter unlocks open communication, honest discussion, real scrutiny of practices, and commitment to a common purpose. And there's, as I said before, there's strong evidence that the Charter also has an effect around equality and diversity and inclusion in all its forms. So it's having a positive impact not just on gender and gender in the intersections with race. However, the Charter we do need to find methods of collecting standardized measures of culture. So currently we don't tell people how to measure or collect information on what's going on in their institution. We tell them it's up to them, but actually we received feedback that they would like us to think about what kind of metrics can be used to measure culture. And then that can be used for them to benchmark against one another. There are challenges that do threaten engagement with the Charter, one of them being the resourcing of this. And so quite a lot of the time, the people that this Charter should be aiming to help are the people who are doing all the work, and then that can impact on their careers. So we need to try and find ways of supporting the institutions and departments so that it's not just generally the sort of women academics who are trying to do all this work and put in these applications and making the system better for everyone else, but it's impacting negatively on their careers. And a lack of leadership and support. And this tends not to necessarily be the top, because the top senior management tend to be supportive. And Shirley, you had a great phrase for it yesterday, is it the muddy middle? I'm going to adopt that one. Yeah, so the muddy middle, so the deans of faculty, the heads of school, that kind of thing, who sort of go, we need this, you go away, you do this, but aren't actually fully supporting the process. So to sort of run along parallel with the evaluation, we've set up a steering group to review the Charter. And so they're going to use the evaluation, but also they're carrying out their own focus groups with people in the sector and their own survey as well. And the aim is to reduce the burden of the work, but maintain the rigour. And so the sorts of things they're going to be looking at is whether a full renewal after 4 years is the best way of showing progress or impact, or whether or not something that's more, I guess, time-consuming for us, but less time-consuming for the applicants could work. So site visits, or just an updated action plan with a site visit, and we come in and talk to the staff. Because these documents it's like a dissertation. They're sort of between 12.5 and 15,000 words long. So it's a lot of effort, and the people were reporting that you do the work for 2 years, and then you spend 2 years doing the work for the application, and that actually stops you doing the work within the institution. And so the results of the review of the steering group are expected at the end of 2019, and then there'll be an announcement about what changes we're going to make to the Charter. So people often ask about why we should get involved in this work. And there are many reasons, but one that tends to resonate in the UK with academics is that it can increase your research funding. So this is from a gold department in the UK. This is from Imperial College. And they found that the Athena Swan process and the work that they did around that led to more diverse thinking. And they believe that this then increased their collaborative working, which led to an increase in their research volume. So it increased from 8 million to 13 million within 4 years, and we're waiting to see whether or not that increased again within their next application. In addition to that, in 2016, we ran a survey called ASSET, the Athena Survey of Science, Engineering and Technology, and we ran it alongside several of our learned societies and professional bodies. And it went out to 5,000 academics and researchers in the UK. And what it found was that women rated holding an Athena Swan Award as the top equality item to consider when they were deciding to take an academic position. So looking at the Charter or the process in other jurisdictions, between 2013 and 2016, a European Commission Framework Programme 7 funded project was set up, and it looked to aim to address challenges facing research institutions in achieving gender equality. And there were 12 partners involved in this project. So part of the project was looking at schemes like Athena Swan that tried to address the underrepresentation of women in STEM. And they looked at 8 schemes across the world. And I'm going to struggle to remember all 8, but they included Project Juno, there was the Pallades Award in Australia, and I'm sure I can look up the others later on. What it did find, though, was that Athena Swan was the only scheme that they assessed to be both successful and transferable to other countries, to other areas of science. So the Charter expanded to the Republic of Ireland in 2013, and it's a cross-sector initiative that's supported by the Higher Education Authority in Ireland. So that's the main higher education funding body. We've established a national committee, and they act as a conduit between us and the higher education sector in Ireland, so that we make sure that the version we've created for them is correct for their challenges. And we help review and tailor the processes for that. It was STEM-focused initially, but it's expanded now with our post-2015 process, so it now is about gender equality and is focused across all the areas of higher education. And so since April 2015, 9 universities and 12 departments have been successful in getting bronze awards. What I should say is there are only 9 universities in Ireland, so that is the full sector. That doesn't look very impressive, does it? There are only 9 universities, we got them all. We're also now working with what would be called the Institutes of Technology. So they're the more vocational focused higher education institutions in Ireland, and they've got on board, and we're working with them now to get awards. And so there was a post-pilot survey asked last year about whether or not the Athena Swan pilot had helped raise awareness of gender equality issues, and 96.2% of those that responded replied yes. So on to Australia. So the Athena Swan Charter expanded to Australia in 2015, and we support SAGE, which is the Science Australia Gender Equity, And it's a program that was set up by the Australian Academy of Science and the Australian Academy for Technology and Engineering. We've supported a pilot of 45 institutions in Australia. Anyone who knows Australia will know there's actually only 44 higher education institutes in Australia. So there's a few medical research institutes and publicly funded research agencies in there. But I think we've all decided that with that number, it's not really a pilot. We've got basically 90% of higher education institutes in this pilot. So because of that, they had to split it into 3 cohorts. And we supported the SAGE program to adapt the process and the application for the context of Australia. And so there's a section around Indigenous Australians. So cohort 1, they put in their applications in 2018, and the results were released at the end of last year, and there was a 75% success rate. Cohorts 2 and 3 have applied this year, and their results will be released later on. SAGE conducted a midpoint evaluation of the pilots, and they found that even sort of partway through, that there were already strengths evident, and they found that the charter created a structured, credible, and transparent process for institutions to engage in that strengthened organisational governance and encouraged and facilitated collaboration and communities of learning and practice. So the Australians have set up regional networks all around Australia, because it's a massive country as well, and they're really working together to support each other to get awards. Because it's not a zero-sum game, because anyone can get an award, they've really sort of... There's still the competition of wanting to get an award, but there's also the competition to be the most sort of helpful and to support one another. And they've really, it's a really great culture to be working in. Around the challenges, middle management buy-in, so that's that muddy middle again, and also data and analytics capabilities. So they don't have a national body of data collection, and so they were struggling to collect some of the data and analyse some of the data that we were asking for. So Canada's been mentioned a few times, and I feel that actually if you want to know more about Canada, you should talk to our Canadian partners at the back. But we will be supporting the tri-agencies to develop their dimension scheme. And so this again will be based on the framework, but covering more characteristics. The pilot was launched in May this year, and it's got 17 members and 23 affiliates. So thinking about some of the challenges and solutions for people who are participating in these schemes, data collection, data analysis, and benchmarking can be difficult. You think within an institution, or I did when I started at Cambridge, I was like, oh, I'll just go to the central HR data people. They'll have everything I need. Nah. You've literally got to figure out who you need to blackmail or bribe to get the information that you need. And this takes time. Some of the things you can do to help with that is look to see what other data collection is being asked for of your institution and see if you can kind of streamline in with that. Making sure you allow enough time for the self-assessment. People sort of think it can take sort of 3 months. From my experience, it can take sort of 2 to 3 years to really get everything that you need and conduct the meaningful analysis. Try and think about building data collection infrastructure from early on, so that it might take time initially, but then you've got the systems in place that you can run the data and get the information you need much quicker in future. And pooling any discipline data for shared benchmarking, so talking to professional bodies and learned societies. Resourcing and recognition of the self-assessment team has been a challenge across all the different iterations. And so making sure that there's workload allocation models and that the work that you're doing around this is included in that. And then some of the things we've seen in the UK and Australia is that institutions are embedding equality and diversity in job descriptions and promotion processes so that it actually becomes part of the everyday work and not this add-on that people have to do in addition to their other work and research. Getting the timing right is really important, so balancing being ambitious but also being realistic. You're not going to be able to make massive changes in your numbers within 3 months. So think about what are the small changes you can make first, the low-hanging fruit, the changes in culture or knowledge or opinion, and that in turn will start to change the numbers within the institutions. And then getting buy-in from the top and the middle, so identifying the senior level people who will champion the work that you're doing, but also trying to get EDI objectives set in for the senior management team. And I did manage that in Cambridge after a while. So they had objectives that they had to meet, and if you can sort of make it align with the objectives you want to meet, it's brilliant. But has there actually been any change? So for every award round we have in the UK, we do an awards booklet, and we compile examples of good practice from that round. And these booklets provide a track record of what's going on in the sector. And so I recently flicked back to 2006 to see what examples of good practice there were. Just having a formal induction for staff was seen as good practice. That's not even mentioned now because it's just so embedded within the culture now. Reviewing and providing feedback on draft promotion paperwork. Again, that doesn't really come up because it's just something that's done as the norm now. And personal development encouraged, whatever that means. And now for 2019, we see active engagement with equality-related activities built into head of school and head of department job descriptions. We see departments that have put in place bridging funds so that there can be contract extensions for fixed-term staff on maternity leave. We've seen people change their student assessment because they realised that the men were doing really well at exams, but the women weren't, but both men and women were doing fine at coursework. So they completely redid the undergraduate student assessments. And we've seen people realise that they haven't got the funds to create a nursery itself, but what they did have was the time to lobby the local council to provide childcare. And so innovative ways of going, okay, childcare is a problem, we don't have the money to fix it, but we do have the time to email the council week after week, get other businesses on board to tell them that we have this issue of childcare. So I need to update this slide because see, it's a few years out of date, but we have also seen a change in the number and proportion of women professors in the UK. And I need to do the time from 1994 when HESA started to 2004 because it was static. It was 13 to 15% for the 10 years. So to be able to show that kind of increase in the next 10 years is actually pretty huge. And it's now actually at about, I think it's 27% female professors in the UK. So, yes?
And just to clarify in your presentation, when you say staff in the UK or in other countries, for the US we say
Faculty, yes, sorry, yeah.
It does refer to faculty.
Faculty, yes it does, yeah, sorry, yeah. This is faculty. Thank you, Becky. Okay. Thank you. I should Becky.
There's plenty of time for questions, and I'm sure that there are plenty of questions.
Good morning. My name is Karen Weaver. I'm from NYU, and I'm one of the new vice presidents who oversees global faculty engagement and innovation advancement. So really excited to be here. And I recently transitioned from Oxford. In the UK, I was based at the Blavatnik School of Government, so I appreciated everything that you said. And it's interesting, after being in the UK for several years and transitioning back here to the US, to see some of the changes on the ground in terms of university culture. And that's actually my question. It's for you, but it's also for you as well, Shirley, because my question actually stemmed from your presentation in terms of how do we think about healthy departments and healthy institutions? How do we define those terms? And I think part of what I've been seeing, particularly as I transitioned from the UK back to the US, that historically there's been a recognition and a rigor placed on academic and intellectual excellence in terms of research, your research agenda, and how robust it is. And I want to know if there's a way to kind of quantify and really kind of list out what it means to have a healthy department, which then would promote a healthy institution. So I wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about what are the elements that allow someone to be in the gold level. What does that look like? And then Shirley, I wanted to know in terms of your work that you've been doing, what is it that US institutions can learn from our peers from abroad, and what are some specific ways we can think institutionally about how to promote healthy cultures and climates within departments that then kind of really spread to the institutional level? Thank you.
It's a really short question. Really short answer as well.
So, I mean, what? So I think, what creates a healthy department will depend on the department type. But I think to the first 3 gold departments in the UK, they all went to chemistry departments. And that's because they really recognize the cultural challenges within chemistry. So the long working hours culture, the masculine culture, the meanness, if I can say it. There's a culture of meanness in chemistry in the UK, and I worked for 6 years for the Royal Society of Chemistry, so I feel I can say that. And what it took was the heads of department to really say, we're going to tackle this and we want change. And they had different reasons for them wanting to make the change. Some of them, it was because they had children and they had wives who worked, and they couldn't do this long hours culture of research anymore. And so they made the point of going round at 5:30, 6 o'clock and going, I'm going home, you're all going home too, and sending people home. Because your research can suffer if you're there all night. You're not generally going to produce better research. So telling people to go home, making them go home, created a better culture, a more collaborative culture. But also starting to train people around bias and calling people out for doing things that they shouldn't be, saying things that they shouldn't be, calling people out on bullying and harassment. And those are the things that really start to make a cultural change in those types of departments.
I think that many unhealthy places are unhealthy because of sins of omission rather than commission. You have incidents and they go unaddressed. Everyone kind of knows about it and talks about it, sub rosa, but they don't basically rise up to become a conversation that needs to be held across the department. And we all know that. I mean, the fact that we've had departments where there has been rampant harassment, for example, and everybody knows the harassers. Everybody knows the harassers. And they warn the people to stay away from them and not to basically find themselves alone with these people, and yet they are allowed to stay. That's what I'm talking about, basically not being forthcoming with regard to your challenges and not essentially creating an atmosphere of trust and respect. And that is an unhealthy department. I mean, and you know that some of these places actually exist. I think that another sign, I call them indicators, another indicator is allowing microaggressions to continue. Things happen within departments, they happen within classrooms. You know, what should one's response be? You stop wherever you are and you have a conversation about what is accepted behavior. The other part is where you do not feel yourself included in the narrative of whatever the discipline is. We can call it culturally responsive pedagogy, inclusive examples, etc. But where people have been written out of history, we need to basically write them back into herstory. It becomes, like when you've been in one of those places, you know immediately that this is not a place you should linger. And I think that it's those kinds of unspoken issues that are really, they're dangerous to the academy. They're dangerous to knowledge generation. That's not who we are. That's not who we're supposed to be. So are there indicators? Yes. There are lots of them. Will you know them when you see them? Absolutely. People feel disrespected? Yes, because they are. People who are left out they're not given credit for the things that they have contributed. That's unhealthy. Those kinds of places, they can't persist with those kinds of behaviors. And they're not good for anybody, all right? It isn't just about the women and minorities. I refer to these marginalized populations as being indicator species. They signal that there's a problem, the kind of canary in the coal mine. They signal that there's a problem, but there's a problem for everyone. So does that help? Yes. Okay.
And I
It's
think
time for break. Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
was just going to add to that because, just what I liked about the Bronze Award for me is that we get institutions that are very honest about what their issues are. And if they've put strong enough proactive actions in place to address them, they will get an award. And then they have to, if they want to keep that award, they have to then show that they've actually done something about that. But they do get a Bronze Award for being honest about those issues. And I think that's a system that works in academia.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. We're going to have an entire hour at the end of the day for just questions and answers. So if you don't get your questions answered in the first round, don't worry. I always just think it's interesting when you start to articulate things like what makes a healthy department and everyone's nodding and you're like, wow, when you verbalize this sounds totally insane. Here's this bad actor we're all told to avoid, usually him, at parties, etc. But it's cool, like we won't bother getting rid of that faculty member. It sounds crazy when you articulate it.